So, hi everyone, and welcome to the third session in our Nurses2in3 programme. This programme includes a series of 3 sessions, all led by a nurse who has experienced mental health difficulties. My name's Catherine and I work for Doctors in Distress. We are an independent charity providing mental health support to all healthcare workers across the UK, and we run programmes of peer support groups which run from 4 to 10 weeks, as well as specialist-led webinars such as this one. Today's session is on returning to work and wellbeing and will be led by mental health academic Emma Dillon. There will be time at the end for questions as well, but please also do feel free to come in on the mic if you have a spontaneous moment and a question you want to ask, and Emma will do her best to answer it. And you can also use the chat box or the Q&A feature as well, whichever is most comfortable for you. As I said at the beginning, just another note, this session is recorded and we will be sharing this with you within the next week or so when the footage is ready. You can choose to remain anonymous if you wish. Only myself and Emma will be seen, and you can also change your name in the chat box. So now I will pass on to Emma to let the session begin, and I really hope that you enjoy it today. Thanks, Emma.
Thank you, Catherine. Nice to meet everybody. As I said, I'm very happy for you to jump on with your microphones, be anonymous or whatever you want to do. And Catherine's going to help me manage the chat while I'm sharing my screen. It's not as easy for me to see that. And if we don't cover anything that you ask or raise, please don't worry. Catherine's going to send me questions or comments, and then I can always get back to Catherine to get back to you, if that's okay, because I'd hate anyone to feel like we've missed anything that you want to share or ask. So welcome everybody to this final session, and I must start with an apology. This session was due for December, and you may have been booked in then, I'm not sure, but it's quite ironic actually, because obviously the session is about returning to work and wellbeing, and I actually was poorly when we were due to deliver before. I had the dreaded COVID again, and I was in that dilemma of, I feel really bad cancelling, lots of people are signed up and people are busy, but as we'll talk about today, it was really important actually. I put my well-being first and thought, no, we can do it another time. So apologies if you did have to rearrange things before Christmas, but it's great to be with you today and to look at this really important subject. I don't profess to know it all or talk at you for an hour. It's an opportunity to just explore things together and share situations or ideas. And I'm going to use my personal story to kind of frame some experiences that I've had and things that have been helpful or not so helpful, and look at really how we support ourselves and the people that we work with and support in transitioning back to work and or study. And that could be following a period of poor health, maternity leave, study, just taking some time out. It could be a range of reasons why maybe you have a break and then considering going back. A little bit about me. I am a mental health nurse by trade for many years, over 30 years, and I currently work as a mental health nurse academic at the University of Northampton, where I've been for about 11 years, predominantly working with pre-registration nurse education, and then more latterly working in post-reg education with a real passion, as well as obviously providing education around how we look after our patients. But my passion has also been, how do we look after ourselves and each other as nurses, doctors, healthcare assistants, the whole team really. So that's been my areas of interest and research. And my own experience of poor health really brought those two worlds colliding together a few years ago. And quite ironic really that something that I'm very passionate about and educate about actually fell on my own doorstep. So I'm going to talk you through my sort of journey, but then also bring perhaps some evidence bases and tips in around that. So hopefully it will be helpful. So just moving on. To begin with, I think it's really important that we start and really look at ourselves. And I use a lot of imagery when I do sort of education, because I think, we all learn in different ways, and sometimes images can be really powerful. And we perhaps all interpret them very differently, which is really important. And I think as nurses, as health professionals and other professionals, sometimes there's this perception that society has on us that we're almost superhuman. We're, an angel or a villain sometimes, or we're this person that can cope with, perhaps unusual things, not what the average person deals with, and we're very trustworthy, and we're almost like this superhuman person. And I think sometimes we place that myth on ourselves as well, and we begin to believe that we cope with everything. We have to work extremely hard. We're invincible. We're never going to be the person who experiences poor physical health or poor emotional health. We're always going to rally round, and we're here to look after everybody. And I think that was perhaps how I perceived myself. Prior to being poorly, I can honestly say I was living my best life. I was working in my role, I was enjoying it. We were developing lots of new ideas. We were looking at this sort of area of well-being. I was studying my doctoral studies on this very subject about the well-being of nurses, and thinking, yeah, pretty good actually. I'm living my best life. Things are great. And actually, in hindsight, I probably was running on empty, running on adrenaline, loving what I did, wanting to make a difference. And if you ask me the question today, I work very differently. But for years, I had been working in probably a superhuman pace, which I think many of us working in healthcare do. And maybe that's okay periodically to have those periods where we are really working intensely. But longer term, our bodies weren't built physically or mentally to work at that intensity. And it's interesting, I've done a lot of reading around this, and some of you may have heard of a gentleman called Gabor Mate, who's done some really interesting work. His most sort of famous work is When the Body Says No. And he talks about particularly people working in healthcare, people that are very caring and giving, that eventually, if they don't look after themselves, we succumb to either physical illness or mental illness or addiction. And it's quite common sense, really, when you think about it. It's not rocket science, is it? But I think I certainly had never perhaps looked at myself in this way. I had encouraged others. Well, you must look after yourself. You must take some time off. Don't work late. Let me take that work from you. But I perhaps hadn't looked at myself. So I think when we are returning to work or study, for whatever reason that has been, even if it's been really positive, like having a baby, getting married, going on a lovely traveling around the world, it's about thinking, okay, who am I, and what is really important to me, and what image am I giving off to other people. So I think to begin with, when you are returning or supporting someone in returning to work or study, whether it be a physical or emotional challenge, it's really important to think about your view of self and how others view you, and how we view others. Because sometimes we have an expectation that, for example, Catherine's coming back to work, and she's going to be Catherine and she's going to work just the same, but maybe Catherine's come back slightly different for whatever reason, and perhaps we don't see that. So I think that's probably my first and most important thing for us all to think about, and perhaps how we change that view in society as well. So moving on, me really and my story. So, I am a mental health nurse and mental health academic. So I've spent my whole life working with people who have generally had poor mental health, and often on the very severe spectrum of mental illness. And I guess I thought I was mentally probably extremely healthy. I knew what to do. I knew how to look after myself and reach out, etc. And I think my identity was very much about being this mental health professional, which probably overtook other roles in my life, my other identity as being a mum, a wife, a daughter, a friend, which are very, very important to me. But I think sometimes the balance can sometimes get tipped, particularly when you enjoy what you do. And in 2020, when I told you I was living my best life and felt I was, firing on all cylinders in every aspect of my life, unfortunately, I developed COVID. And I developed it quite bad. It was 2020, it was pre-vaccines, so I was one of the early people to catch COVID. I didn't know anybody else in my circle, professionally or family or friends, who had COVID. And it pushed me into a completely different world. Physically, obviously, I was very, very unwell. And emotionally, I really noticed a shift in my emotional health, because I was in a situation and my identity had really been like, I didn't know what was happening. Suddenly I wasn't able to work. So I wasn't this nurse or nurse academic. I had been working in the early phases of COVID very safely in my own home, which I was very appreciative of. But we've been very busy sorting out nurses going into placements and the change in regulations from the NMC and the government, supporting student nurses who were, very scared about becoming ill or what this meant for their career. So I'd really been in the thick of it, working really long hours, but almost thriving on that sort of busyness. So suddenly I'd gone from working, long, long hours, hoping to be making a difference, to being bedbound. My family also all developed COVID at the same time, including elderly parents. So there was all this stress about I couldn't help them, physically or legally. I couldn't get to them because at that time you couldn't mix at all. So emotionally, I was taken into this complete turmoil. I was completely incapacitated, physically and mentally, and suddenly I was very dependent on everybody for everything. And my identity, really, I didn't know who I was, where I was. All my identity became as I became the patient. And if any of you ever have been physically or emotionally, mentally unwell, I don't know what your experiences were, but for me, that was a real headbend. How could I, the person that had spent, 30 years encouraging other people to get better, to seek intervention, empower them, provide knowledge and education, suddenly I was the patient and I knew nothing. And actually, the people around me didn't know very much either, because it was all so new. And at that time, people were generally either, unfortunately, dying from COVID, or people seemed to be making a recovery, but I didn't know anyone, luckily, who had either died or had got better. So I had no frame of reference to even begin to think about how this was going to pan out. So I think identity is really important. And when I look at my identity now, having been through, and I'll sort of talk you through the process of where I am today, I think my identity is very different than it was pre being unwell, because now, yes, being a nurse and being an academic is really important to me, but it's much less important to me. It's part of me, and I want to do that well when I can. But being a mother, a wife, a daughter, and a friend, I've given that much more value in my identity, having been physically and emotionally in a very, very difficult place. So I think, again, if you're returning to work or study, think about you. Who are you? Have you changed? Are you the same? Which it might be great. How do other people see you? Because I look the same. If I bump into people, I still look like Emma. I still sound like Emma. I still have a job. But actually, I'm very different. And I remember when I was thinking about going back to part-time work after I think I was off for about 7 months originally. And I spoke to a colleague who was a mental health professional and said, kind of need a marketing strategy because I don't know how to present myself anymore because I'm very different. I don't want to be this 100-mile-an-hour person who's constantly striving for the next exciting thing and wanting to work or feeling the need to work long hours. I want to be different. I want to be this calmer, more sort of time to pause person who wants to be effective, but in a different way. And I really didn't know how to market that or how to tell other people that I was different. So he was really helpful, and we talked through some strategies. And at the time, I felt so kind of helpless, I suppose, while I was acutely poorly. And the following months, I started writing a blog because I felt like, again, my identity, who was I anymore? I couldn't even, cook for my family. I needed people to help me do very basic personal tasks. So I kind of questioned who I was, and that made my emotional health feel very, very fragile at times. So I thought about how I could market myself, and I think it's important to think about that and reaching out to people as well. And don't be afraid to say I'm different. And this blog that I did was just a way that I felt, well, do you know what? If I can't do much, but I can lie in my bed, and sometimes I can have the energy to just write down some rambling thoughts, and sometimes they didn't make much sense, to be honest. And maybe I can share that because maybe I can show to other people that it's not always that scary to actually appropriately give a bit of self. And it really reminded me that for years I'd been an advocate for people with mental illness who I'd seen, really were invisible to a lot of society. And I'd really, sort of fought for them and been their advocate and ambassador. And I thought, oh my God, this is me now. I'm experiencing this thing that not many people know about. And, it's a really strange situation to be in. And it was quite cathartic for me. But when I went back to work, I shared it with the team and I said, look, you don't have to read it and it's not worries me or anything like that. But a few people who read it said, you know what, it was really helpful. It really helped me understand maybe what you'd been through and how you're feeling. So I'm not saying that's something you should all do, but, find a way that you can perhaps communicate with people. And it's not as bad as you think sometimes. And people are actually really kind to me and they help me kind of look out for myself as well. So I think identity is a really big thing. And I reflected on how I'd supported other nurses or other academics back to work. And I'd hoped that I'd always been really compassionate and work with the person. But I think we're all guilty sometimes of when somebody comes back to work or study, that to begin with, we're really kind and supportive and protect them perhaps. But then, the work rolls in and we see their back and they're looking okay and they seem okay. And maybe we forget that actually maybe we need to check in with them and see how they're doing and how they're feeling and that kind of stuff. And it really made me much more aware of that for other people. But equally, I have an accountability for my own identity. And, how can I expect other people to know what I want or what will be helpful if I don't tell people? Because they're just going to think that I'm the Emma that was before. And yes, there are traits of that still there, of course, but I am very different. So I think, don't be afraid to think about your identity and what's important to you and how that might change. I decided to give up my doctoral studies because I just knew I hadn't got that energy. Or if I did have that, I'd rather focus that on my family. And that was a change. It was something that I'd worked very hard to get to that point. it's part of my identity as well. It's something I really wanted to do. But I can make a difference in a different way. And, that's changed my identity, but that's okay. But I guess, I had to kind of work at that as well. So again, sort of looking at my journey and thinking about other people's journey in returning to work or education after physical or emotional illness, I always use this statement a lot, life is like a tapestry, it's full of twists and weaves. And certainly I think when you've experienced a break from work for whatever reason, I think it's the future can feel very scary, emotionally. How's this going to be? How am I going to cope? Physically, how's it going to be? How am I going to cope? And I think it's about being prepared, because if someone had told me before being ill everything that would have happened, I would have been like, no, never, I'll never get that poorly. I'll just need a few weeks off work and then I'll be back doing what I was doing. And, that I foresaw my life being like that till I retired. But obviously, you're thrown into a different tapestry, and suddenly my picture of the future was looking very different. And even now, I don't really know what the future will be. But I think at the beginning, it felt quite overwhelming. And I just thought, okay, I'm going to go back on a phased return. My organisation were and have been beyond amazing. And I feel very lucky for that, because particularly with the long COVID and also supporting lots of nurses, particularly through return to work from physical or mental illness, poor health. I know they don't always have it easy, so I do feel very lucky. But I guess I thought I would do that phased return to work, and then I'd slot back in and happy days. That would be it. But it wasn't like that. The return to work, was extremely well supported, and I had to work really hard on reining myself in sometimes, because I'd get a little bit of the old Emma coming back who wanted to be 100 miles an hour and, get on the next initiative. And I was very grateful, and still am, that peers would say, oh, hang on a minute, Emma, have you really got the time and the capacity or the energy to do that? And things were going okay, and I was kind of slipping back. I had a different role, which was great. And those of you who know about professional nurse advocacy, I was very lucky to be involved in that, which again was like my life's dream. It was everything that I believed in around supporting nurses, educating them, improving quality, making change. It was a real dream job for me, I suppose. So I felt really lucky. It was like, wow, my tapestries moved me into this new avenue. And it was great. It was really great. But as that started to develop and I started to go back to full-time work, I started to struggle again. So physically, initially, I started to notice that I was struggling. And then, of course, the emotional side of it comes in, because it's almost like you're grieving that person again. And it's almost like, here we go again. So I haven't got acute COVID now, but I'm developing long COVID and chronic fatigue. And I think I'm doing okay, but then reality kicks in and it's proving difficult. So physically, that's difficult to deal with, because you have all the fallout of a long-term condition, and you start to see, the symptoms bubbling up. But then emotionally, that's very difficult, because it's like, I don't want to go through this again. It's almost like another piece of you is being taken away. And I remember at that time, I was delivering the professional nurse advocacy module, which I still deliver. And I saw something about trauma counselling from the Royal College of Nursing. And I thought, oh, that'd be great for some of the participants on the course, because they were really, talking about some very difficult experiences that they had or were going through. So did my little bit of research and thought, yeah, it really looks good. And then I had this light bulb moment and thought, Emma, I think you need that. And why hadn't I thought of this before? And again, it's perhaps this identity thing that I thought I was a mental health nurse, I was a mental health educator. I'd worked out in my head how I'd gone through all this physical trauma. I'd spoke to a couple of mates and work were being great. But actually I was traumatized and I hadn't really seen it myself. So I contacted the RCN and I think initially they thought I was inquiring about, signposting students and colleagues onto this. And I was like, no, it's me. I need it. And I have to say that was a huge turning point for me. I was allocated a therapist. She was really experienced. She challenged me, nudged me in a really good way, because sometimes us nurses, and particularly when you're working within the field of mental health, we think we know all the answers. We know what to do and what to say, but actually I didn't. I didn't know the answers. And that was a real turning point for me. So I think don't be afraid. Not everybody's going to need that. Some people can manage things themselves or manage it in other ways. But I know there's still a lot of stigma, particularly within nursing, particularly within healthcare, about acknowledging, accepting that maybe you need some emotional support. I hear it every week in a variety of settings that I'm in, and where there is still this stigma about maybe realising or accepting or reaching out for help, and how even in our own profession of nurses or doctors or whatever it is, sometimes we're quite judgmental about our peers. Being open about accessing emotional or mental health support. And I think we all have a role to play in trying to break that down, because it's really, really important. And I certainly wouldn't be sitting here now still being able to work if I hadn't have had that support, because it really, really challenged me to really think about changes that I needed to make and still need to make. So I think that's a really important part of Tapestry. And I'm not saying everybody needs to access that, but I also think if you're supporting somebody in coming back to work or study, it's about making them aware of what is out there, what is available. There's so much available out there now, which is a positive thing, and demystifying or working on the cultural stigma that it's okay, that, we are humans, we do have emotions, and we deal with very difficult things day in, day out, things that people will never experience in a lifetime. And there's only so much of that we can process. And I'll talk about some perhaps strategies. I think it's on the next slide. So that was a really important time for me, and that led me to explore some time out of my role, because it was proven very, very difficult. And I thought, this is ironic. I'm educating, facilitating other people about looking after themselves and well-being and, all the things that I'm very passionate about, but my health is deteriorating. So again, my employers were very, very supportive. I was very honest with them and said, this is difficult for me at the moment. And I was lucky to be offered a secondment to do some project work, which wasn't so physically demanding. So I did that for a year. Again, Tapestry, if someone had told me that, I'd have said, no way, I'm going to be doing this role till I retire. I love it. I'm not going to go off somewhere else. And it took quite a bit of courage, because it was well out of my comfort zone. I went to work with NHS England for a year, working within mental health nursing project. And yes, I still had health challenges, but for a variety of reasons, I kept much better during that time. So again, my Tapestry completely changed to what I had viewed it was. That came to an end, and I wanted to go back to my role, A, because I felt I wanted to try again, and B, I feel very loyal to my employees because they've been so supportive with me. And that is my dream job. I love it. So again, emotionally, and that's another change, and working through all of that. What's it going to be like? Am I going to fail? I now come back with even a different experience. I've worked away for a year. Things have changed. So I think it's about being mindful yourself of that. But equally, if you're supporting someone, be aware of that, because you're aware of all the changes that have happened in that year or that time. But actually, me coming back, it's like, oh, wow, things are very different. Things have changed. So I think it's about thinking about that for yourself and in your supportive role. So I've been back now for 6 months, and again, was doing great. Everything was going along okay. And then, as I mentioned, became poorly with COVID again before Christmas. So my tapestry has changed again. And I was talking to Catherine before we started, and that's set me back again, and emotionally and physically, that's taken me back a little bit, because it has impacted on me, and I am now working in a phased return, sort of reasonable adjustment phase, because of that. So I think what's really important, and looking at this slide, and I'm at a processing time where I am thinking about the future. How long can I continue to do this? Is that great? And work are amazingly supportive, and it's something I want to do, but I don't know what the next 6 months, a year are going to look like, because life is predictable, and having a long-term condition, for those of you who have them, is very challenging, and emotionally it can be quite triggering sometimes, and bring up lots of conundrums, I suppose, but also lots of challenges. Lots of positives. That's my long COVID brain. So it does open up different opportunities. And I think the one thing that I think is really important, and I see it when I'm supporting people, but I have learned myself, is about the importance of pausing sometimes. Because I think, we work in environments that are extremely busy, extremely fast paced. Things are changing so rapidly, and that's just within our work, let alone, the world, the environment, all of these things. Life is very, very fast paced. And I think there's almost a culture that I think is changing, where it's always been a competition almost of who's the busiest, and who's the most stressed, and who works the longest hours. And I think we're starting to see a change in that, and actually we should be celebrating the people who work to their time, who take their lunch breaks, who take their days off and take their holidays. That's what we should be competing to do, more than I'm so busy. And it's about having time to just pause and just think, not necessarily if you've been off work or not, just in your everyday life. How am I? Do a bit of a self check-in. I put a little thing in my calendar, my electronic calendar, on a Friday, and it's just like sort of a wellbeing check-in. What's the week been like? Am I on top of things? Am I behind? How am I feeling? Just have a coffee. I don't necessarily talk to anybody about it. I just think, where am I at this week? Sometimes I have to do it before the Friday, because the week's been pretty tough. And I think, oh my goodness, I just need to step away from it all and have a think, what can I do today? What can wait? What do I maybe need to have a chat with someone about, because it's just too much? Can't do it. I would never have done that before. I would have soldiered on and hell or high water tried to resolve it. That was stupid if I think about it in hindsight, and I would never expect anybody else to do that. But that was the trap that I'd fallen into, and it was only me that had put myself in that trap. It wasn't anybody else. So I think, give yourself time to pause and encourage other people around you, whether they be returning back, whether it just be in the day job, whether it be with your family. It's important to just stop and think, okay, let me do a check-in. try and foster in rest, and that is emotional rest as well as physical rest. I'd always thought rest was very much, about going to bed and sleeping or having an odd power nap at the weekend. It isn't, it's about proper rest. It's about resting from digital stuff, from noise, and it'll be different for all of us. I love silence now. I just love absolute silence. So it's important, even when the ward is very short of staff or a project needs finishing, if you need a day off, you need your day off. And as much as it's perhaps not very nice to imagine, the world does go on without us. We like to think we're all like indispensable, but actually the work will get done somehow, and maybe it won't be as you would like it to have done, and maybe others will have to work harder, which we don't find very easy to think about. But your rest is really, really important. And I think also it's about restoring self and each other. Talk a lot about restorative cultures, restorative conversations. I think it's really important that you instigate that yourself. So, it will be just saying, can I just catch up with you if you've got 5 minutes? Just, could do with a chat, or seeking more formal sort of restorative opportunities. But as a culture, as a team, or with your family, or whoever it is, think about, what things can we do that are restoring, are going to give me back some emotional energy, some physical energy, and maybe some time. And I think we all have a big responsibility in our work lives, but also in our out of work lives to do that. So remember, pause, rest, and restore. Really important. And nothing bad is going to happen if you do that. Okay, you can go back and pick up what you're doing, unless you're in obviously a life-threatening situation. Then get some time to pause a bit later. I'm mindful of the time and questions. I'm just going to go on to my sort of last slide, and then we can open it up. So I guess my message within all of this is, these 3 sessions have been focusing on mental health and nursing. And, we all have mental health, we all have physical health. Sometimes our mental health is good, sometimes it's in the middle, and sometimes we might develop, mental illness and be really, really impacted by that. And often many of us will move up and down in between, because that's life, isn't it? Just like physically, some mornings we feel great, full of energy. Other times we're not so great, and sometimes we might develop physical illness or severe physical illness. So I think recovery and sustainability, whatever that may look like, is really important to think about when we're returning to work or study, when we're supporting people returning to work and study, but also just in our everyday worlds, really. And in mental health, when we talk about recovery, I remember when I first went to the university, I was one in a minority of mental health nurse academics. And I was talking to a colleague who worked in acute adult care, and I was talking about recovery. And she was like, yes, like you recover from an operation, or, you have tonsillitis and you have antibiotics and you recover. And I was like, yeah, I get that. But in when we're working with people or looking at people's mental health or mental illness, that spectrum, recovery is about sustainability. It's about, what's important for me to feel well. So I think it's important to think about that for yourself. And recovery is a journey, and I'm on that journey still, and it's still a bit bumpy. And I don't really know where it's going to go. I've got some hopes and thoughts about where I would like things to go, and I'm sort of working around those. But recovery, it really involves you working with people that you work with, working with your family, friends, or your support systems. That might be a church for somebody, or I don't know, it might be going marathon running for somebody else. It's about kind of saying, these things are important to me, and perhaps when I'm not so well, could you perhaps remind me of those things, or, meeting someone for coffee once a month is really important to me. So recovery is like a whole community approach. And I use this picture, obviously this is the picture I was going to use at Christmas, but I thought it was still relevant because it's like shoots and spring in this sort of a global warming world that we have. Who knows when things bloom nowadays? But I think about for yourself. Don't be hard on yourself. And if you do have to take time out for whatever reason, or you feel your emotional or physical health, because I think we can't separate them. They are one and the same, and sometimes one might be better than the other. But we are a whole person. But I think just think about what really helps you. Think about the people you might need to bring on board with that help, or the people that maybe when you're struggling a bit, maybe the people that you perhaps see less of. I always joke about mood hoovers when I'm teaching, and I can be a mood hoover, I can be a negative Nancy sometimes. I think we all can. But when I'm not feeling physically or emotionally good, negative people aren't good for me. They bring me down. I need to be around people that are positive. So that's something that's really important to my recovery, because if I start listening to someone who's just moaning about the world, it exhausts me. So it's about thinking about what's important for your recovery, and don't be frightened of it. And if it changes, that's fine. But have a bit of courage. And what's the worst that can happen if you ask someone to help a little bit? The worst they're going to say is, I'm a bit busy, or I can't do that. That's okay, isn't it? You'll find another strategy. So I'm going to sort of wind down there and sort of hand over to Catherine really for questions, and try and look at the chat myself.
Thanks, Emma. Thank you for sharing your story and obviously emphasising the importance of pause, rest and restore. I think that's one thing that we take away from this session. That's definitely it. If anyone does have any questions, please feel free to come on the mic or pop them in the chat or the Q&A. We haven't had any yet, but Ian has said that it's great to hear your story, and it's so completely agree that there is a huge stigma around suffering and reaching out for help.
Oh, that's very kind, Ian. Yeah, there is still, and I honestly, and it makes me really sad to say this, that as health professionals, we're actually the worst regarding this stigma, because we're not honest about ourselves, and we can be quite judgmental when we see our colleagues struggling. And I think that's really sad. And it is changing, it's definitely changing. People are, and I guess some of the positive things about COVID have been that people and the mental health agenda has become much more visible. But I still think we've got a long way to go. And it's really sad when we see the figures around nurses, doctors, health professionals with poor mental health, and the suicide rates that we see, particularly for female nurses. It's really, really sad. And I guess we all have a responsibility for ourselves, but certainly for those we work with, to look out for those signs and try and help people, because I have lost nursing colleagues to suicide, and it's a horrible experience, because you feel so helpless that, why didn't I see it? Why didn't I spot it? But we know it's a very complex, the whole thing is very complicated. But I think the more of us that can be open about these things, share our experiences, and actually just be a bit kinder to our colleagues, that we can make change. We definitely can. So it's refreshing to see people challenging the stigma, but still a long way to go.
Okay, we've got 2 more minutes left, and we've just got a few more comments, Emma, so I'll just blend these two into one. We have someone who said, we should be using a trauma-informed concept when doing supervision, appraisals, etc. We could spot this early and support colleagues. And then Nikki said, do you have any advice if managers aren't supportive when we return to work? Work is so much more pressured in the community mental health team I work in. Waiting lists and workload have increased since the pandemic, and productivity is the priority for my manager.
Yeah, absolutely. I worked in community mental health team for many years and managed large community mental health teams, and the pressures now are much more. But I think if you're not getting any joy with your line manager, you're entitled to seek supervision, restorative conversation with another professional. So don't be afraid to go elsewhere. HR teams can actually be really supportive. I hadn't had anything to do with HR before, and actually they're amazingly supportive. Referral to occupational health. Again, I think people are frightened of these things. Massively helped me. It massively helped me to have phase returns, reasonable adjustments, still do. So I think, obviously your line manager is your line manager, but there are other avenues that you can go to for support. And that might feel like, oh, I'm going against them, but you're not. You're just thinking about, actually, I want to do this job. I want to do it well. So I need some support. So I would look out. Of course, you've got your union reps and stuff as well. Doesn't mean that you're complaining or being serious. They offer some really good advice. Coming to things like this, I joined a Doctors in Distress webinar when I was off work. That's how I sort of met Catherine's team. So I think, look out for other things that are on, because someone else is probably going through the same and might have a solution that might help you. So just reach out.
Thanks, Emma. And then quickly, just before we come to an end, Jill says, I love that statement. I have responsibility for me. And Anne says, thank you for your talk. In my experience, employers of nurses work in other settings outside of mental health are not as supportive of chronic health conditions and mental health in general, unfortunately.
Yeah, it's a very mixed picture, I think, but there's a lot of work to do in that area, and come on, let's start. Let's make that change for ourselves first, but for others as well.
Thanks, Emma. So we have now come to an end. Again, thank you, Emma, so much for leading today's.
Pleasure.
If you have any other questions that you would like, I will pop my email in the chat. And then if anyone has any questions about Doctors Distress or the work that we do, or any questions for Emma, I'm more than happy to kind of pass them on and get them back to you. But again, thank you, Emma. This recording will be shared with you via Eventbrite in the next week or so, hopefully without any technical issues. But in the meantime, I hope everyone enjoyed today's session and has a great rest of the week. And yeah, thanks. Take care, everyone.
Thank you. Grab a cuppa and have a pause.
Bye.
Bye. Bye.